Meeting this afternoon on the Office of Secretary of State and in the Department of Administration. This is the hearing from the agencies. We do have a substitute this afternoon. Senator Peck will replace Senator Clays for today's executive meeting. So, Senator Peck, you're welcome to the committee. Okay, we'll begin with the Office of Secretary of State. And Molly Pratt. Molly?
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman Alley and members of the committee. My name is Molly Pratt. I'm a fiscal analyst with Legislative Research Department, and I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the Office of the Secretary of State. Also here today is Jennifer Cook, the Assistant Secretary of State, as well as Sandy Tompkins and Andy Burlingham, both with the agency. The Office of the Secretary of State is created by Article 1 of the Kansas Constitution. The office is charged with many responsibilities, including administering elections, collecting certain records of Kansas businesses, and publishing the official publications of the state of Kansas. To carry out its duties, the Office of the Secretary of State is organized into 3 divisions. The Administration Division is responsible for providing operating services for the agency. The Business Services Division is primarily responsible for administering filings for Kansas business entities and the Uniform Commercial Code. And the Elections Division oversees national and state elections, candidate filings for national and state offices, and assists local election officers administer elections. Each division is tasked with administering a corresponding program that executes the agency's mission to serve Kansans. In addition, the Elections Division is responsible for the administration of the Help America Vote Act program, which was implemented by the agency to comply with the Federal Help America Vote Act of 2002. If you'll turn to page 4, you'll notice a table outlining the summary of expenditures by category, as well as a state general fund bar graph. On occasion, the agency will request an SGF appropriation for costs associated with responsibilities that require substantial funding. For example, the 2023 legislature appropriated the agency $4.7 million SGF for fiscal year 2024 to implement 2023 Senate substitute for House Bill 2053, which authorizes one or both political parties in the state to hold a presidential preference primary in calendar year 2024. The agency also receives SGF matching funds from the legislature in order to remain compliant with federal HAVA provisions. In August 2020, the United States Election Assistance Commission awarded the agency a total of $4.9 million in grant monies for election security. The grant was contingent on the state providing a match of $984,984 SGF, or 20%, which was deposited into the Democracy Fund. The EAC granted the agency an additional $1 million in election security grants in both federal fiscal year 2022 and federal fiscal year 2023. On page 5, you'll note a chart detailing the Information and Services Fee Fund. That fee fund allows the Office of the Secretary of State to charge and collect an information services fee. Per statute, all monies received by the agency are remitted to the state treasurer. And on page 6, you'll notice another chart detailing the Technology Communication Fee Fund, which was established to cover the cost of technology systems that support services provided by the agency, such as the electronic filing of business forms. The Technology Communication Fee Fund earns revenue through a technology communication fee that may not exceed $5 in addition to filing fees. The revenue collected through the technology communication fee is to cover the cost of technology systems that support services provided pursuant to the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act. On page 7, you'll find the fiscal year 2024 analysis. Subsequent to the 2023 session, no adjustments were made to the $10 million, including $4.7 million SGF, appropriated to the Office of the Secretary of State for fiscal year 2024. The agency submits a revised estimate of $7.6 million, all from special revenue funds, for expenditures in fiscal year 2024. This represents an all-fund decrease of $2.4 million, or 23.8% below the fiscal year 2024 approved amount, and including a decrease of $4.7 million SGF. Yes, the revised estimate includes an SGF reduction of $4.7 million. The 2023 legislature appropriated the agency that amount in fiscal year 2024 to implement House Bill 2053, which authorizes one or both political parties in the state to hold a presidential preference primary this year. However, the agency removed the $4.7 million SGF from their revised estimate because at the time of the budget submission in September, the agency had not received notice from either party that a presidential preference primary would be held in Kansas this year. The revised estimate also includes $1.6 million in special revenue funds for fees and other services. The agency is requesting an increase of $1 million above the 2024 approved amount so that it can begin preparing for the expiration and replacement of the current statewide voter registration and election management system. The contract for the current system expires in January 2026, and federal law requires the state to have a centralized voter registration system. Also included in the revised estimate is $800,000 in special revenue funds for federal HAVA aid payments to local election offices in fiscal year 2024. The agency will use HAVA election security monies to provide grants to local election offices to enhance the security of the storage of voting equipment prior to the presidential preference primary, as well as to enhance the security of voting equipment while it is deployed during an election. Also included in the revised estimate is $488,913 in all other adjustments. Approximately half of this amount is to account for an increase in salaries and wages, specifically an increase in employer contributions for fringe benefits. Other adjustments are attributable to increased costs for services such as printing and advertising, as well as the agency's purchase of software and other supplies. Also included in the revised estimate is 40.5 FTE positions, which is the same number of positions as the amount approved by the 2023 legislature. The governor recommends $12.3 million, including $4.7 million SGF in expenditures and 40.5 FTE positions. This is an SGF increase of $4.7 million or 100%. The governor recommended the $4.7 million SGF to account for the agency's lapse of the same amount that was appropriated last year to implement the presidential preference primary. In early December 2023, the agency learned that both registered parties would hold a presidential preference primary this year. Also included in the governor's recommendation is 40.5 FTE positions, which is the same number of positions as the agency's estimate. Chairman Alley, would you like me to continue on to fiscal year 2025? Okay. Okay. The fiscal year 2025 analysis is on page 10. The agency requests $7 million, all from special revenue funds and expenditures. This is a decrease of $633,142, or 8.3% below the fiscal year 2024 revised estimate. The request includes $90,646, all from special revenue funds, and one additional FTE position for the Elections Division. According to the agency, the analyst would make current election data and voter registration data, as well as historical election data, more accessible to voters. The analyst would answer questions for specific data, as well as assist with the administration of future elections. Absent the enhancement request, the request includes a decrease of $800,000 in base budget expenditures. This reduction is attributable to the agency's belief that by early fiscal year 2025, it will complete its goal to enhance the security of voting equipment in the state. Thus, the agency does not plan to provide federal HAVA aid payments to local election officers for fiscal year 2025. Also included in the agency's request is 41.5 FTE positions, which is an increase of 1 FTE position above the fiscal year 2024 revised request due to the agency's plan to hire an elections data analyst. And for fiscal year 2025, the governor concurs with the agency's request. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Molly. Is there any questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got more than one question. If you mentioned it, I apologize that I did not hear. I see on the very first page that the FTE positions has increased from 23 at 38 to 40.5, and then in fiscal year 25, it bumps up another 1 FTE. What is that additional FTE for?
The additional 1 FTE between fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025 is for the agency's request to hire an elections data analyst. And I believe there's more information on that on page 12. It explains the job description and what the analyst would be doing.
All right. Thank you. A lot of times, by the way, Mr. Chairman, I ask questions of our fiscal analyst because the agency head is here and they can hear the questions and then potentially ask when they do make the presentation. I also see on page 5 that the Information and Services Fee Fund has gone from, I'm looking at the balance, ending balance of fiscal year 21, 2.7 million to projected in fiscal year 25 of 6.7, which is nearly a threefold increase. The very next page, the Technology Communication Fee Fund goes from a balance of 2.9 million to 4.5 million. And I am asking this question. If you don't have an answer and want to defer to the agency, that's fine by me. But has there been any discussion about reducing or a fee reduction on these two particular fee funds? And because it's clear that they're bringing in a whole lot more than they're needing.
Senator, if it's all right with the committee, I think I'll defer to the agency on that question. And if they don't cover it in their presentation, I'll be happy to look into it after the meeting and get back to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I ask these questions so the agency gets a few minutes heads up before it's time for them to testify. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions? I had one. If I can find my question again. Back page here. Well, I'm going to have to look and see. I marked it down, then I lost it. Just a moment. We gave the money back because we weren't going to send the money to the local election, local election boards. Have they coordinated that with the local election boards? We were going to give some funding back because, let me see if I can find a page it was on. Well, I'll look for it, and I'll have that. Is there any other questions for the Molly at this time?
Chairman Alley, may I ask, were you referring to the SGF appropriation?
It may be where we gave the money back, right?
Yes, so the legislature appropriated $4.7 million for the agency to utilize in fiscal year 2024 for the presidential preference primary. However, at the time of the budget submissions in September, the agency hadn't been notified from either party that there would be a presidential preference primary held, which is why they lapsed it from their budget this year and why the governor recommended it in the governor's recommendation, because at the time of the governor's recommendation, they did have the answer that both parties would be participating in the preference primary.
Okay, I found my question. That was not the exact question. The question was on page 10, under the federal HAVA and aid payments. And it said the request includes a decrease of $800,000 from the special revenue funds. This reduction is attributable to the agency's belief that by early 2025, it will complete its goal to enhance the security of the voting equipment in the state. And then they do not plan to provide federal HAVA aid payments to our local election officers. And has that been coordinated with our local election officers?
I do not have information on whether it has been coordinated, but I will note that it is a decrease from their base budget expenditures. The agency can likely touch on that a bit more, but once again, if they don't in their discussion, I'll be happy to look into it after the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? Seeing none, we can bring, if you would, bring the Assistant Secretary of State up, Jennifer Cook. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Cook, Assistant Secretary of State. Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the opportunity to appear before the committee, provide you an update on the agency and some of our initiatives that tie back to our budget. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I'd be happy to answer the questions that were raised initially, and then I can continue through the presentation while it's fresh in everyone's mind. With respect to the FTEs, we have 38 positions that are currently filled. We have 2 vacancies that we are trying to fill at the moment. So that brings us to our current 40. And then, as Molly indicated, we are requesting 1 additional FTE in FY 2025. That would be an election data analyst for our elections division. And so the reason we're requesting that position is we've seen over the past few years the heightened interest in elections and the requests for different types of data and information for both voter registration information, comparisons of historical data, turnout, information like that. And while we respond to those requests, we think that we can improve upon that and provide more information in response to those different types of requests, make that a more beneficial and transparent process for the public, for the legislators. And so that's the position that we're requesting for FY25. And that's the background on our FTEs and as it currently stands.
Will that position continue after the election?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is intended to be a permanent position. So after every election, we would provide data related to that election with respect to turnout, with respect to voter registration statistics, and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You indicated that you currently have 38 positions filled. You have not been able to fill the other 2, and you've had that authority for several months. Is there a reason to your understanding why you have not been able to?
Yes, Senator. One is a position that just came vacant not quite a month ago, and that is in IT. And it is very challenging to fill IT positions. We have posted for that position. The other position is in accounting. Again, we're just trying to find the right person that fits what we need in those 2 positions. So we are actively recruiting. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd also be happy to respond to the question on our admin and tech fee balances. Yes, that is correct. They are growing. Those are tied to every filing, and since we're a fee fund agency that comes into our agency, our filings have increased steadily over the past, particularly 3 or 4 years. We have just moved off of our AS400, which I think you've heard us speak about before. It is our very antiquated computer system that has been in the agency for about 30 years. So we moved off of that in January. We're very pleased to have achieved that. It was a priority for the Secretary, and we achieved that using our internal IT staff to develop and implement our new system. So we're proud of that achievement. But it's my long way of saying one of the things that we are looking at is how can we align our admin and tech fee funds to better reflect our actual costs and to bring those balances down a little bit. As Molly indicated, in both of those fee funds, we have a statutory amount set generally for most of our filings. And so what we have to do is look over all of our different types of filings to see where we can make adjustments. So we bring those balances down, but we don't shortchange the agency or, of what we need. But the majority of those funds generally go to SGF, and then we collect the admin and tech fee fund on top of that. And then with respect to election security and the $800,000, I can provide you maybe a little more overview of our FAVA funds and how we're using those and what that $800,000 reflects. So over the past 3 or 4 years, we have maybe a little bit longer than that. We've been working with counties to help them invest in cybersecurity initiatives to secure our elections. So we have done that using HAVA funds. One of the needs that we identified last year in talks with the county and just looking at other best practices is how do we strengthen our physical security around elections? And so last fall, we put out a grant proposal to our county election officials that would allow them to make improvements in their physical security. So if they need cameras, other monitoring devices, if they need to put in keypads so they can monitor who goes in and out of rooms where election equipment is stored, if they need more secure ways to put their equipment in a lockbox and transport it to the polling places. So that's what our physical security grant program is intended to do. We have 84 counties who have requested funds for that. So we estimated in our budget that we were going to use 800,000. We're going to go beyond that, and it will probably be closer to 1.7. That's about what the county total came in at, and we want to be responsive to those county needs. The counties are putting in a 10% match for that program, and our goal is to have, they'll place their order for the equipment that they need. We will approve what they have requested. The goal is to have this program wrapping up by the end of this fiscal year or very, very early into the next. And really our goal is this year because that's where we've requested those funds to be used. We will be providing, putting out a press release in the next few weeks to let everybody know what those 84 counties are. And again, our goal is to just help them with that physical security need. So the 800,000 decrease that's showing in FY 2025 is just showing that grant program is ending. It is not in any way meant to reflect that we will not be continuing to support counties with election security. Our cybersecurity election initiatives continue, and we're always looking for different ways that we can support the counties to make sure our elections are secure.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
If there's no further questions with the Office of Secretary of State, we'll close that hearing and move on to the Department of Administration, and we'll do the deliberations after if we have time. So right now we have Stephen Wu. Stephen, welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon, Stephen Wu with Legislative Research. With us today, you'll see Secretary of Administration and Director of the Budget, Adam Proffitt, as well as Leighton Gunn with the Division of the Budget. I also see that Jim McMurray with the Kansas Development Finance Authority is with us in the audience as well. That will become relevant when we talk about some of the items in the budget. So just as a bit of a roadmap, I'm going to leave a lot of the operational details of that to the agency. I just want to set the landscape of what is included with the governor's recommendation for the Department of Administration for this budget cycle. I'm going to talk about overall what is included in the budget, and then I'm going to talk about 24 and then 25. And then last, I'll touch a bit on what other things you can find in this analysis. So just as an overview, the Department of Administration's primary role is to provide central services for state agencies. This means that there are several implications for their budget. The first is that there are many programs located or organized within it. So for example, the department provides both accounting services, printing services, facilities maintenance, and so on. So a number of different functions. It also means that there are both on and off budget expenditures. This means that on budget expenditures are like most expenditures you'll see within an agency's budget. Off-budget expenditures, as a reminder, refers to one state agency paying another. For accounting purposes, we don't include those in the final total to avoid double counting items. So for the purposes of this analysis, I'm going to be talking primarily about on-budget items. Lastly, the last characteristic to note is that the department pays for the debt service on a lot of obligations the state has. They function as the primary payer for these obligations, which you'll see in their budget. Additionally, the governor frequently recommends enhancements and recommendations relating to the department's role as a central services provider. So you'll see a number of items that will appear in the governor's recommendation that will not in the agency's request. So just to jump right into it, on fiscal year 24, you'll find this on page 7 of the analysis. As a reminder, the legislature approved about $210 million in expenditures, in on-budget expenditures for the agency, and about 101.5 FTE positions. This is primarily a reference for Senator Peck, but the FTE line you'll see on that table includes both on and off budget FTE counts, my apologies. You can find the full breakdown on page 18. There'll be a table with on-budget FTE positions as well as a line for off-budget, so you can see that split. So for on-budget FTE positions, that's about 101.5. There has been one change since the legislature last met, and that is that about $5.6 million in unspent SGF reappropriated from the end of fiscal year 23 into the beginning of fiscal year 24. The lion's share of these relate to the docking renovation. I'll be talking about it later in this analysis, but it is purely a matter of timing. It wasn't spent at the end of 23, so it's spent at the beginning of 24. So moving on to the agency's request. The agency requests about $186.9 million, about $135 million of this comes from the state general fund, this also includes 106.2 on-budget FTE positions. This is a bit lower than the adjusted approved amount that the legislature determined, about a little under 30 million lower than what the legislature approved. And this is due to the items you'll see in that table above. So beginning with item 2, you'll see about $58,000 in SGF to address the pay plan shortfall. That's item 2. Item 3, you'll see that the agency is spending a bit less on the docking renovation, about $37 million less. This is primarily because of an adjustment in the project schedule. So if you'll recall back to the 2022 session, the legislature approved $120 million for the renovation of the Docking State Office Building. Half of this was to come from SGF, half of this was to come from the ARPA State Relief Fund. The department has since updated their project schedule and now anticipates completing these expenditures in 24. So the final year the dollars will go out will be in 24, down from the original estimate. You'll see a table of this on page 8. You'll see a comparison, it's around the middle of the page, a comparison of what the original estimate was as well as what the new estimate is. So you'll see that the final total is the same, just the payment schedule is a little bit accelerated, a little bit different than before. Item 4, you'll see $6.4 million, all from ARPA federal funds for a variety of facilities upgrade and maintenance projects. These projects have all been recommended by the Subcommittee as well as approved by the State Finance Council. The numbers you see here are merely the expenditures, expenditure side of it. So the State Finance Council approved authorized the project and authorized the funding source for them. These numbers represent those dollars going out and actually being spent for these items. So these items, there are 3 projects included here. The first is to replace some outdated air handlers in the Capitol complex. The second is to improve physical security throughout the Capitol complex. And last is to make some upgrades to the state printing plant. This, as you'll recall, this is the same item that the legislature authorized and approved last year. Item number 5, the division of the budget is budgeting about $200,000 of the state general fund to reappropriate from 24 to 25. So they anticipate spending that much less in 24, and you'll see a corresponding increase in 25. Item 6 relates to official hospitality limitations. So this refers to the maximum amount that the Secretary of Administration and the Office of Public Advocates can spend on official hospitality purposes. Currently, the limitation is $2,000 for the Secretary of Administration and $1,000 for the Office of Public Advocates. The agency is requesting that they increase this limitation to $6,000 for the Secretary of Administration and $3,000 for the Office of Public Advocates. There aren't any dollars associated with this. This is just raising the cap of how much they can spend on official hospitality items. Let's see. Item number 7, you'll see an increase of about $1.6 million in a variety of other expenditures. These are a bunch of different items grouped together. I can go into more detail on any of these if you'd like, but in this interest of time, I'm going to move on to the governor's recommendation for 24. So for 24, the governor in general concurs with the agency's request, but for 2 changes, which you'll see detailed in items 8 and 9. So item 8 refers to the governor's recommendation to spend $400,000 of the state general fund to create and furnish a mail scanning building in response to the white powder event from last summer. This would be to create a separate offsite facility where mail would be scanned for any potential threats to recipients of that. About $150,000 would go to equipment for this building, and about $250,000 would go to the structure itself. Item number 9, you'll also see a request for recommendation for $7 million of the state general fund to create a licensing platform for compliance with SB 66, which is the Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact. As part of the compact, the Secretary of Administration is required to establish one of these platforms to, as a central warehouse for electronic licenses for various agencies to interface with. If you'll recall back to Omnibus of last year, this is the similar item that appeared there. The legislature last year didn't recommend the dollars for that then, asked the agency to come back with more specific details on the project. This is, which they are now doing, which you see here now. So the total of that comes to about $7 million. For fiscal year 25, you'll see this detailed on page 12. So for 25, the agency requests about $177 million. 128 million of this comes from the general fund. And this budget request includes 111.2 FTE positions. This is a bit lower than their estimate in 24, about a little under $10 million lower. And this is due to the items you'll see listed out below, 1 through 4. So item 1, we'll see an $8.2 million decrease for that adjustment for the docking renovation project. Since those dollars are going out in 24, you won't see them in 25. So that number just represents that adjustment. Item number 2, this is where you'll see that budgeted reappropriation in the division of the budget, that $200,000. Item number 3, you'll see a slight adjustment, about a little over $600,000 and 5 FTE positions for various operations within the division of the budget. The majority of these will be put towards 5 new policy analyst positions. Our understanding is that the division of the budget would like to create these policy analyst positions to mirror the structure of legislative research, which, as you'll know, is split between both research staff and fiscal staff. And item number 4 is that same official hospitality increase for the Secretary of Administration and the Office of Public Advocates. For 25, the governor concurs with the agency's request, but there are but recommends 3 changes to it. The first is perhaps the largest. Item 5 is about a little under $500 million, the majority of which comes from the general fund to address various state debt reduction items. Instead of what you see on that page, I would direct the committee to page 16, which you'll find, where you will find a lot more detail on what these obligations are and what the governor's recommendation is. So just to go down the line, these primarily refer to, the vast bulk of these expenditures refer to the pension obligation bonds that the state has issued in the past. There was one issuance in 2004, one in 2015, and one in 2021. So relating to the 2004 issuance, the majority of it is currently debt service for that obligation is paid out of the Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund, ELARF. The governor's recommendation is to maintain the overall debt service payment for it, but because of the ending balance of ELARF, the governor recommends spending $1.5 million of SGF and reducing $1.5 million out of that ELARF, out of that Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund. Like I said, that is to address the ending balance of ELARF. The other 2 items as it relates to the KPERS pension obligation bonds relate to the 2015-2021 issuances. They have remaining principal balances of roughly a little over $830 million for the 2015 issuance and a little over $460 million for the 2021 issuance. The governor recommends the spend of about exactly $450 million of the state general fund to retire debt across these 2 issuances. The recommendation would require the Department of Administration to converse with the Kansas Development Finance Authority to determine the best mechanism to achieve this purpose. But the end goal is to defease those bonds in some way to address the payment for those bonds. The remaining $47.7 million of that amount will go towards 3 different bond issuances. These are for a variety of things. But the majority of these are refinances of old bonds. Old bonds are refinanced and bundled together, and so it becomes a bit difficult to parse out the specific projects therefore. But in general, they refer to Series 2016H, which refunded bonds issued in 2007 and 2008 for a number of capital improvement projects, such as the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, the Capitol Complex, National Guard Armory, and so on. So the governor's recommendation here is to call that series of bonds and spend $20 million of SGF to pay off the remaining balance. Included also within the governor's recommendation is to negotiate a tender offer and pay off the obligation on Series 2020K, which transferred ownership of the current state office building as well as the DCF Topeka Service Center, the Myriad building, from the Topeka Building Commission to the state of Kansas. So the governor's recommendation here would be to spend $23 million of SGF to negotiate the tender offer and pay off that debt obligation early. The last of these bond series that the governor recommends paying off early is Series 2020S. This was issued in 2010 as part of the payment source for the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility, as well as for renovations to the Kansas State House. The remaining principal balance of these series of bonds is about $4.8 million. The governor's recommendation is to just pay off that remaining balance. There are two other items included within the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 25. If you'll turn back to page 12, these are detailed in items 6 and 7. Item 6 is to pay off the master lease printing agreement. The governor recommends $3.2 million to do this. About $4.2 million of this would come from the SGF. There would be an adjustment from other funds to accommodate for this. So just as some background, in fiscal year 22, the agency spent about $5.9 million to purchase some printing equipment to replace outdated units. These are used to provide printing services, copying services, binding services to its various customers. The current agreement requires annual payments of about $1.1 million through fiscal year 28. The governor's recommendation is to pay the remaining balance off at the end of 25 instead, thereby eliminating that debt so you wouldn't see it in 26, 27, and 28. Item number 7 is $1.5 million for that SB 66 licensing platform project. These dollars are for maintenance of the project. So the recommendation in fiscal year 24 was to create the platform. The recommendation in 25 is for maintenance specifically. That all said, that concludes my remarks on the Department of Agency Administration's budget. There is a lot of other information included within this analysis. There's some information on specific programs within the agency. You'll find that starting on page 18. You'll find some more detail on debt service obligations. You'll find that on page 43. And you'll find some information on capital improvements expenditures. You'll find that in the very back on page 45. That all said, would be happy to answer any questions, or if the committee would like, turn the mic over to Secretary Profit.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions for Stephen? Senator Powell. Beck, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the governor's rec for all of these payoffs, I see at least one says to negotiate a tender offer and pay off. That makes it sound to me that maybe some of these are not callable. Are all of these debts something we can pay off? I was under the impression from a couple of years ago that we had pretty much paid off all of the bonds we could at that time. Have there been some additional bonds that have now, if you will, gotten to where they are callable, to where we can pay off the debt?
So of these bonds listed, the short answer is going to be some yes, some no. Some are callable, some the governor recommends exploring other mechanisms to reduce the state's debt. I'm going to leave the specific mechanics of that to the secretary and, if he so chooses, Jim from the Development Finance Authority.
Okay, that would be great, but you don't know, just with looking quickly, which ones are callable, which ones can be paid off? And if not, we can just let the department answer that question.
I can pull from my phone. I have that information on my phone. It would be from the Development Finance Authority's debt service report. So if you'll give me a second.
Mr. Chairman, I'm all for paying off debts as much as we can, but if it's not something we can pay off, I don't know why the money would be in the budget. So we'll find an answer before the end of the committee meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, and I apologize if you covered this, on page 21, there's an increase of 1 FTE for the Office of Chief Counsel. Is that correct? And can you tell us what that's for?
Not off the top of my head, but as soon as I can get back to my computer, I can get that answer for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Stephen. We'll move on to Department of Administration and Adam. Secretary Prophet, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here today. If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll start with Senator Erickson's question and address that right off. The one FTE in the Office of the Chief Counsel, I believe, is related to the Director of Labor Relations position. It's a position that historically the state has had, but it got melded into a different position some time ago and it kind of fell off funding. We are trying to restart that. Specifically, we have a new MOA moving forward, hopefully soon, with one of our larger labor unions. So I want to make sure that we have somebody who understands all those agreements and is in contact with the facilities and with employees and everybody else. So that's what that one FTE would be in the Office of the Chief Counsel. We're going to house it there. Again, restarting something we used to do many years ago. So moving on to the presentation that I've put together here, my team has put together, I should say. They do all the actual work. As Stephen mentioned, going to page 2 of this presentation here. I'm sorry, I've got a clicker. So Department of Administration is the state's central service organization. And what that means is we effectively have our tentacles in every other agency across state government, and we provide a lot of the central services for them, both for agencies and for the general public. You can see that, as was mentioned, and we'll get to Senator Peck's question in a little bit about debt service. We pay for most of the debt service across the state, so either through SGF appropriations or through fees and rents that are charged to agencies that we pay that debt service. We'll talk about that a little bit in greater detail in a little bit. We manage and operate the state's ERP system, which is just a fancy way of saying the central backbone. It's all HR, accounting, payroll, procurement, job board, things of that nature. Is all on one system that is operated, managed, and designed by D of A. We use Oracle, but we have folks that do some development. We provide administrative services for many of the state's smaller agencies. So some of the non-cabinet agencies, for example, have a smaller accounting team or just one point of contact. We have a staff of accountants that would process their payments and do a lot of the accounting work for them. Likewise, our Office of Personnel Services provides HR support for many of the smaller agencies and many of the cabinet agencies as well. We collect rents and fees from other agencies. You talked about on budget versus off budget. Those rents and fees that we collect are generally for off budget expenditures. And we also serve as the administrative home for other divisions across state government. For example, the Office of the Public Advocate, which has the Can Care Ombudsman, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and the Office of the Child Advocate, they reside within Department of Administration, but those directors do not report to me as Secretary of Administration. We simply have them within our department and provide administrative services for them. Similar with Division of the Budget, they sit within the Department of Administration. This will sound weird since I am the budget director, but generally speaking, the budget director would not report to the Secretary of Administration, but rather just receives administrative support. So we're unique in that aspect. Moving on to the next page, I just wanted to put an org chart in front of the committee here to show how broad our reach is, even just within the agency. So I'm going towards the bottom there, and we have 10 total divisions. So if I exclude the Office of Chief Counsel and my IT department, there are 8 remaining divisions. Office of Facilities and Property Management, that can be anything from the architects and the engineers that help with the buildings to the lease administrators, could be the groundskeepers, the housekeepers that take care of this beautiful building and others. That's a division that covers about 2 million square feet of office space and garage space across the Capitol complex. That does not include the parking lots and the grounds that they also take care of. We have tradespeople in there, painters, carpenters, plumbers, things of that nature. So very broad even within that division. We also manage and operate the state's state employee health benefits plan, which includes the workers' comp. We have the central mail and print and surplus shop. We have central HR, central accounting, procurement. A very, very broad spectrum is what I'm trying to get at here. So moving forward onto slide 4 here, you can see what the enhancement requests are for the Department of Administration, as Stephen mentioned. So debt service payoff, $497 million. which is in fiscal '24. I would note that within the governor's budget report, or recommendation rather, that was in fiscal '25. We just submitted a GBA request to each of the money committee chairs yesterday to pull that money forward into fiscal '24 for reasons that I'll talk about in just a moment. The $7 million for Senate Bill 66 implementation, $400,000 for mail scanning equipment. As Stephen stated, that would both purchase the equipment, the mail scanning equipment, and build the structure in which it would reside. In fiscal '25, $4.2 million for the printing equipment payoff, to pay off the master lease a couple of years early. This is really going to help specifically the print and central mail area. Candidly, we've been doing a fee review over the past 6 to 8 months because we've been struggling with cash flow in that division. We think that we need to realign our fees that we charge agencies for the services that we provide. By making this payment early, it'll help us stabilize those fees and not increase fees across agencies. So this would really be a savings to other departments across state agencies, or across the state. And then the $1.5 million for the ongoing platform maintenance related to Senate Bill 66. So just to provide an example, slide 5 is last year we requested some increased funding for rehab and repair across the Capitol complex. Just want to show you what we've done with that money so far in fiscal '24, a few of the projects. What I'm trying to point out here is that we try to be very conservative with the funds that we ask for and the enhancements that we ask for and really use them for targeted purposes. These are just some of the programs, or excuse me, some of the projects that we've gotten to in fiscal '24 with the money that the legislature was kind enough to provide an enhancement for last year. Slide 6, you can see the debt service, what the total amount is over the last several fiscal years, and you'll see in fiscal '25 the big increase there. That's related to the early debt payoff that we're requesting here. And you can see the breakdown between state general fund and other funds. So slide 7, what we have here is 2 different tables. The top table there lists out each of the debts that D of A provides debt service for. You can see the original principal, then the principal remaining, the coupon rates across each of those series, and the annual debt service. You'll see that we have about $1.7 billion of debt on the books that D of A is providing debt service for, and annual debt service is about $154 million. The table on the bottom are the bonds that we are proposing to retire early. 2016H, I'll just go line by line. 2016H is callable in fiscal '25, so this would actually be a call. You can see the coupon rates from the annual debt service and what the principal remaining is. 2020S is not callable, and I've got Jim McMurray here to help me with the technical details, but there is a method by which we could retire this debt by defeasing it, which is, it has the same net effect as a call. It's just a different vehicle to arrive at that. And I defer to the technicalities to Jim McMurray with KDFA to talk through that with the committee, if that's okay. I'm going to skip 2015H and 2021K for a moment and go down to 2020K. That one is also not callable, but we would do a tender offer with the bondholder. And really the thought there is, in short, try to make an offer to the bondholder to offer to buy that debt back at a discount, and then it would eliminate it from the books. So it is not callable right now. Actually, it would be callable in '25, but at a premium. So by taking advantage of the market, interest rate market environment that we're in right now, we would offer a discounted rate to the bondholder to buy that back and then retire it. And that's how we would get that debt off of our books. Between 2015H and 2021K, those are the pension obligation bonds. I want to be clear that the governor is not recommending retiring the entirety of these, but rather taking $450 million of SGF and either defeasing a portion of them or doing a bond tender offer, again, by which we offer to buy back a portion of those bonds at a discount that would be advantageous to the state. It would still retire them from the books. So, Senator Peck, to your question, in short, most of these are not callable, but there's still a method that we can get to get them off of the books and retire the debt early so that we're saving SGF and going forward. And I believe, yep, that would be the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Adam. One question I had back on your organizational chart, you have added some positions for a future agency or future organization under your organization. where do they fall on this chart, or do they?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're referring to the 5 FTEs that Stephen mentioned. So put my other hat on, talk as budget director now. Those would fall within the division of the budget, and you'll see those on the very bottom left of that org chart. Again, division of the budget sits administratively within the Department of Administration, but operates as an independent agency. So it'd be 5 new FTEs in the division of the budget.
And
as
those would be
Stephen
coming
mentioned,
on
they'd
in
be doing it.
25?
I'm sorry?
Those would be coming on in 25?
That would be, yes. And that's a good time for the division of the budget to hire new folks, because then we're starting the new budget cycle for the next year, but then get up to speed on both the mechanics and the policy aspects that they're going to be covering.
Okay. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Do you have any comment on some other budgets we're looking at? We're looking at, for example, in the Public Safety Subcommittee, we're looking at bonding inside of there, and yet we're talking about retiring bonds over here. I don't know, when we think these things through, sometimes there's arguments about who's paying for it. Are we paying for it with a surplus right now? Does that mean that we're giving something to the future generations or taking somebody from the past? There's a lot of different philosophical things that go along with that, but it seems like we have a budget or a bond portfolio basically of stuff, which you've laid out here, but we're talking about adding new bonding in instead of using SGF on certain new buildings that are coming out. Can you just comment on how you think about that as a strategy? I'll leave it at that.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that if I may, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. So, and I'm speaking as budget director now, not Secretary of Administration. As we review the state's debt portfolio, as well as our cash position and our capital needs, quite honestly, we're trying to push down the amount of debt that we have as a state, whether that's debt today that we've incurred over the years for whatever reason, or future debt, and trying to avoid future interest costs and just pay for items that we're going to need in the next couple of years, but using cash that we have on hand. So the recommendation of the governor's budget recommendation was multifaceted. One, there was about $500 million of early debt retirement, which you see in here, right? We talked about that, trying to push down the level of debt that we have. Yes, sir, about $500 million. Yes, $500 million. And then the other half of that was about $500 million to pay cash for new capital projects instead of issuing bonds. The way we came up with about $1 billion is, if you look back over the life of the pandemic, we received about $1 billion of an enhanced federal dollars for the state's Medicaid program. So the Medicaid program is a joint state and federal program. It's usually about 60-40 federal versus state funded. During the pandemic, we received an extra 6.2 percentage points of federal share. So in essence, 66-34. Over the course of those 3 years, that added up to about $1 billion with a B of extra federal money that we received in SGF that we did not have to spend. That's part of why our surplus is so large. So the governor's recommendation was to take that billion and try to pay down debt and avoid future debt. I've heard some of the philosophical debate about whether it should be current taxpayers or future taxpayers. We're just looking at it as debt reduction, and we've been spending the past 3 years eliminating debt as a state, so did not feel the need to start issuing new bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the non-callable bonds, if we appropriate the money, tender an offer, and it's not taken, where's the money end up? How does that play out?
Mr. Chair, if I may, thank you for the question, Senator. The monies would be appropriated specifically to tender, defease, or otherwise retire the debt, full stop. So we would issue the tender. We will do our level best, working with our partners at KDFA, to retire that. To the extent that we receive acceptance, we would retire that. To the extent that we don't, we would have to lapse that SGF, and we provide a full readout to the committee, to the full legislature, about what we were able to retire versus not, and we would lapse that SGF if we weren't able to.
So the amount of money that is being requested is your best guess at what might be an acceptable offer?
At the time that we developed this recommendation, yes, and the market is shifting underneath of our feet, and that's why we wanted to pull the money into fiscal '24.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the Office of the State Employees Health Benefits Plan. I know that's not in your slide deck, but it looks like there's been a big increase in workers' comp expenses. Is there a reason for that? Or what specifics can you tell us about that?
Senator, would you mind explaining to me which page you're on, please?
Page 37.
Thank you.
Sorry, in the
On the BA.
agency budget, yes.
I will be,
It says this increase is primarily due to payments for workers' compensation claims on page 38, so.
I hate to admit this, but I am unprepared to answer that question. I'd be happy to
That's
chat with
okay.
the director and provide a follow-up to the committee.
That's okay. And are you going to be addressing the governor's budget amendment number 1?
As it relates to the Department of Administration's budget, the first, I think it was 4 items, we're simply pulling forward the funding for the debt reduction from fiscal 25 into fiscal 24. That's all it does, is dollar for dollar, pulling it to fiscal 24 so we can take advantage of the interest rates where they're at right now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Well, I have a small question. It's not that big, but we have had this in other agencies, and that was the entertainment budget. And you're asking to increase that from 3,000 to on up. Policy-wise, I think it's not a large number. But policy-wise, what's your feeling on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To clarify, we don't call them entertainment dollars, but rather official hospitality. I can assure you we're not having dance parties
I'll
over
use
there.
that from there on.
From a policy perspective, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, which I try to be at all times, I want to keep that number as low as possible. I have no intention of spending the entirety of the $6,000, but it's nice to have the flexibility should there be a need to spend those dollars, whether for whatever event might rise up.
We've had that request from other agencies, and I know some of them been not recommended by the governor. And so I just want to make an official policy how we handle that.
Yes, sir, and we are looking at ensuring that we have consistent policy in place across all state agencies so everybody understands what the policy provisions are and what the guardrails are. The guardrails are very important, and it's incumbent upon me as secretary to ensure that we're enforcing that policy, setting forth the guardrails, and that I'm accountable to the legislature for those.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Senator Pittman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On number 5, on this handout that came through, there is an increase in the number of IDD slots and PD slots, about 250. I guess, do we have any idea how much impact that's going to have on some of those waiting lists that we've heard about over the years? Do you have any kind of projections on that? Just a quick commentary.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't have anything with me right now. I was not prepared to address those. Happy to do that in the full Ways and Means. It would reduce the number of folks on the waiting list by 250 for each of those waivers, the PD waiver and the IDD waiver. I don't know what that would reduce it to in terms of number of years, which is how we typically measure it. But 250 that's a large number of individuals that would be able to receive those services should we move forward with that on each waiver, so 500 total.
On that particular one, do you know how many individuals are on the wait list now?
I don't have that information today, sir, but I'd happy to get that back to you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the chairman's question on the small potatoes as it relates to whatever you called it, I was going to use the word entertainment, and that's not the right word, but in any event, if you are not authorized to spend the extra money because you're not asking for additional, where are those funds? What happens to the funds? They just remain with the agency? And I ask this not only because of this particular appropriation, we're talking a few $1,000s, but sometimes it gets much larger. Does the money just stay with the agency in the fund, or is it allocated, or are you able to use it for other expenditures? How does that play out?
Mr. Chair, if I may, thank you for the question, Senator. As Chairman Alley noted, this is not an increase in expenditures, but rather a broadening of the official hospitality usage. So any expenditures within official hospitality would have to come from the existing appropriations. So at that point, you're making choices between operational expenses. If you happen to have a reduction in operational expenses or you need to spend it on official hospitality, you must remain within your appropriated funds. This is not new dollars to the agency.
Mr. Chairman, I understood that. I just was
Okay.
curious as to if, I guess, and the Secretary answered it fairly well. that choices are made as to where they need to spend the funds, but without the authority, they definitely cannot spend them for the entertainment/hospitality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Secretary? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we know how long we have this room? 1:30? Okay. If there's no other questions on the Department of Administration, we'll close the hearing for the Department of Administration and move back to the Office of Secretary. And for those in the room for the Department of Administration, we will not get to the Department of Administration this afternoon. So, yes. Senator.
I was going to make a.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, we will. Okay, so at this time, we'll open deliberations on the Secretary of State's. Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the Secretary of State budget as presented for 2024 and 2025 as approved by the governor.
We've heard the motion. Is there any discussion?
Yes, second.
None discussion. Is there a second? Well, you can do the second, and then we'll do discussion if you're careful.
I'll second it, so we can have discussion.
Thank you. We have a motion been made and seconded. Motion been made and seconded. All in favor? Okay, we're going to go to discussion, and then we'll go to vote. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The $4.7 million for the presidential primary, I don't know what we're going to do with that as a legislature. I do realize we passed legislation to allow both parties to have a primary, but it's clear by the time we get to March the 19th that Kansas is not going to be a player in who is selected for each party. And so I don't really know for certain what my thoughts are. I realize the agency didn't ask for it because they didn't know at the time that they submitted their budget if they would have a need for a presidential preference primary in either party. And since then they have been told that they do, the governor put the funding in there. But I am not one who believes that we need to spend $4.7 million for a presidential preference primary. And I'm not, because this is all fairly new to me as of about an hour ago, not certain what I think about that particular expenditure. If we do, I guess I would have a question. If we strip that funding out, how would that play out? Would that mean that the Secretary of State's office would need to some way find the funding if we do not pass legislation to then eliminate a presidential preference?
Hi, Molly Pratt with Legislative Research. To my knowledge, the House Bill 2053 requires the Secretary of State to reimburse county election officers for costs associated with the presidential preference primary. So that's why they're requesting the SGF to reimburse county election officers. The agency might be able to explain in more detail how they would reimburse or with what funds they would reimburse the offices with should the SGF not be appropriated. And if they don't address that now, I can, or ask them later.
Assistant Secretary Cook, could you come out and help us with that?
Oh, thank you. Yes, last year when the legislature approved the presidential preference primary, funding was requested because counties do have to be reimbursed for those costs. And so the estimate was approximately $4.7 million in order to not provide an unfunded mandate to those counties. So that funding was provided through SGF.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since you are standing there, can a county, I didn't support the legislation, so maybe I'm just a little bit trying to figure a way to save money, but can a county opt out of a presidential preference primary?
No, I do not believe so. I'm, excuse me, I would confirm that, but no, I do not believe a county can opt out of that.
And the reason, Mr. Chairman, I ask this is I'm having constituents ask me, hey, we've got Biden, we've got Trump, we know who the nominees are going to be in each party. Why are we going to spend $5 million to have a presidential preference primary? And so I guess I'll determine how I'm going to vote on this budget, but until we pass legislation to not have a presidential preference primary, we're kind of stuck.
Mr. Chairman, our election director just confirmed for me that no, counties cannot opt out. So the election is actually underway. UOCAVA ballots went out on Friday, so counties are already beginning to incur costs for the presidential preference primary.
And so you're quick with your texting. I didn't even see it's in the text to him to ask the question.
Oh, he's all-knowing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I understand the senator's concerns. However, we did authorize this as a whole body, and we knew at the time that we only have 4 delegates or however many delegates going. I mean, this is what the legislature did. We can't just take it out of the budget without changing the legislation, I don't think. So I don't think it would be right to have authorized it and then to take the money out from underneath all these counties. So I'm going to support this.
Any other questions? I want to go back to the HAVA funds. If you could, I'm sorry, just making you come back up here again. These funds, are they being distributed somehow to the counties?
So, Mr. Chairman, so the way the state receives HAVA funds, so those are, they're called formula grant funds, but they're really appropriated by Congress when Congress decides that they want to provide more HAVA funds to the state. So they are not appropriated on a regular basis. We have received funds in the last 2 years, and then it was a few years prior to that when we received some funds, and then it was a few years prior to that when we received some others. So when funds are received by the state can do within the guidelines set out for those grants, the state can do a variety of things. So for election security grants, it's fairly broad. It's to support election security. And then there are certain things, obviously, that you can do there. So the state can expend the funds to ensure election security, whatever that might look like. The state can support counties in providing election security, so there's a couple of different ways. They don't go directly to the counties. Usually it's a state function. So we have provided some cybersecurity support to counties. So that has been something that the state has paid for, and it has benefited the counties. With the physical security grant that I spoke about that a number of counties have sought, those funds are going directly to reimburse the counties for the cost of those physical security improvements. So it can go a couple of different ways.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on it? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any other discussion on this one? I think, Stephen, when would we be able to, we need to find another time for deliberation on the Secretary of Administration. You can take a look at that and work a schedule on that and get that back with us. I think our report out is Friday, is that right?
Yes, it's next Friday, so the 16th. So you have a bit of time.
Okay, so we'll find another time to do the deliberation on the Secretary, or on the Department of Administration. So if there's nothing else before the committee, we are adjourned.